From writing about music, I know Hot Press writes about other things than music. I mean, there's a lot of political comment in Hot Press, but how did you make that move from reviewing horselips in Ballahadreen?
Well, it was me. I mean, because at the time, Hot Press didn't actually have other things.
Okay.
It was all music, but I thought it should have more. So I suggested that we do more interviews, and I remember the first interview, a political interview with Michael D. Higgins, and then a few weeks later he started to write a column for Hot Press. So, I was down the west, and I was looking to because there wasn't that many bands coming in. I mean, it was really pathetic. I was driving a mail van and writing at night. I mean, I'll just show you how naive it was. I remember one day after I was writing for Hot Press for about a year, Niall Stokes, the editor, rang me one day and said, "Listen, I've got a great assignment for you. I want you to go to Paris to spend a week on the road with Dire Straits.
Very nice.
Would you be interested?" Well, I was, and so I was going home, packing my suitcase and making arrangements. And then it occurred to me, I don't have a passport. I've never had a passport in my life.
And how do I go about getting one now?
I didn't get one, and I couldn't go. So I mean, that's it's hard to imagine now at a time when now you have a laptop and you can, anywhere in the world virtually you can send an email. At that time, to make contact with Dublin, we didn't have a phone, so I had to go out into town collecting 5-penny pieces to make a phone call in the phone box. It's hard to believe.
It's a very different Ireland.
Yeah, and that's not that. I mean, it is a long time ago. I guess now it's the best part of 30 years, but that's not such a long time. I mean, it's an awful lot has happened in that time. So that's kind of how the politics started. I used to go up to Belfast or interview Jerry Adams and stuff like that at a time when nobody else was doing it. So I kind of, developed alongside that, and as a result, then Hot Press began to be noticed by more mainstream publications, and because we were doing these interviews, and they were kind of making headlines in other papers, and that's kind of how I came to be. And then,
how did you make the jump over to the paper of record?
Well, that was a bit longer. I mean, I suppose I started. When I eventually came to Dublin in '84, and then very shortly afterwards I did the interview with Charlie Haughey, which caused huge ructions because of his bad language. I was a bit naive about it. I just thought something happened. To this day I don't understand exactly what kind of misunderstanding happened, who was most guilty of misunderstanding, but I don't dwell on it too long. But anyway, this attracted various people, like Vincent Browne asked me to come and meet him, and he offered me work in the Tribune, and eventually I started to write a radio column for the Tribune, and eventually he made me editor of the McGill TV Guide, which was an appalling publication, which was brought out to challenge the listings monopoly, which were then held by the TV Guide or Radio Times and RT Guide. And he eventually won that case, but it was an absolute nightmare, because we had to produce a listings magazine every day, every week, without actually copying the listings from any of the other magazines, or even so. I mean, Vincent's theory was that there was no copyright on listings, on information. Therefore, if we could find out what was going to be on television by our own devices, we could publish these listings.
Okay, I mean, now if you want to find out what's going to be on TV, you look at your Sky thing and you push the button on the remote control and it'll come up for weeks in advance. But back then, in the horrifying days before cable and satellite, so how did you go about finding out what was going to be on TV?
Well, I had to ring up. For example, there was a program called Today Tonight, which is before prime time. Yeah, and I would ring up the editor of Today Tonight on a Monday and say, it was Peter Feeney at the time, I'd say, "How are you, Peter?" "Yes, John." He would kind of, but after a few weeks, he got to kind of anticipate the phone call. "Peter, I'm just checking, is Today Tonight on tomorrow night?" He says, "Yes, John, it's on every Tuesday night." "And would it be on at 9:30 again?" "Yes, it would. It's always after the news, John." "Yeah." "And does it go on until 10:10? "Yeah, it does, yeah." "And now tell me, on Thursday night, would it start at 9:30? Yes, it will. Yeah. And so I would then be entitled, under Vincent's theory, to publish this
publish
information
that,
as a
yeah.
listing. Whereas if I took it from the actual listings which are handed out by the stations, I would be accused of breach
That
of
could be a
copyright.
very tedious process, though, with every
surely will.
single TV show that's going to be on. You've got to
Yeah,
ring up
well, and we had to
the
mark
makers
each-
of Bosco and ask them what time that's going to
We
be
had to
on.
mark each one own research. Anyone that we found out had to be. So everybody was wondering who this guy own research was. He was a very prolific journalist.
You eventually, as we said, you moved from McGill to the Irish Times, and
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I went to RTE. I was in various. I was in the independent newspapers very briefly. I was in RTE for a year, and then I got I had an approach from Douglas Gageby before when I was in Dublin to join the Irish Times, but I didn't want to do it at the time.
Why
Strangely, because I thought the Irish Times an extraordinarily boring newspaper. I just couldn't be bothered with it. I never read it.
so what changed your opinion?
Well, nothing. I haven't changed my opinion.
Okay.
But I have come to recognise that it has a certain influence. I mean, when I write an article in the Irish Times, you know, as I did last week in relation to a case which is coming before the Supreme Court this week, that the judges, the 5 judges in the Supreme Court, there's a high chance that they will all have read the article before they sit down in the court. Now, that you can't guarantee that with any other newspaper.
Okay, I think this case, you and I have talked about it a little bit, and we've discussed it on a radio program as well. I think it illustrates maybe some of the issues and topics that you have championed in your column. So maybe you might tell us a little bit about that case.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been for 15 years or so, I've been writing articles about the family law system by and large, and but the way it treats fathers, mistreats fathers, and you know, because it mistreats fathers, it mistreats their children. But because of that, I tend to get a lot of communications from fathers, but also from families who are having trouble. And this recent one I got was from a family who had come here from England. The facts were a very complex case, but and in a sense it's very detailed. But essentially, the mother ran into difficulties a couple of years ago. She was in hospital and she ended up being blinded as a result of what is alleged to be negligence by the medical staff. And the couple took an action against the NHS, and very soon after, the social services tried to take their children on the basis that they weren't fit to look after their children. The children were taken into care for a few weeks while various inquiries were held, and eventually the father was able to disprove allegations that he was psychiatrically unwell, and the children were given back. But then it emerged that the children had been abused in foster care, and the parents made a complaint, and the next thing was that the social services intervened again, this time to have the children forcibly adopted. So at that point the family fled to Ireland, and the authorities in Nottingham, as it was, tried to have the HSE intervene and take the children into care. At first they resisted, but for some mysterious reason, this is one of the factors of the case, and there are various theories about it, that there was some kind of high-level intervention. Eventually they arrived at the house one day with 4 Garda squad cars, with between 12 and 16 Guard officers, and took 2 screaming children away from their parents into foster care. That was over a year ago. And for the past year now, the parents have been fighting in various courts to try and get their children back. Because if the children are, if the English authorities succeed in taking them out of Ireland, then the 2 children will be adopted separately, and will never see each other again, and will never see their parents again.